There is a realm of the mind where silence becomes louder than any voice, not the peace of a quiet meadow or a monk's retreat, but the dead, cold quiet that follows the collapse of every illusion. That's where the foundation begins, not in comfort, not in love, not in truth as people paint it, but in the hollow space left after the scaffolding of lies collapses. Everything taught was a cage, every virtue a leash, every rule a shackle dressed in civility. Peel it back and underneath all of it lies fear. Fear dressed as morality, fear disguised as kindness, fear called loyalty, patience, goodness, humility. Not one of those things survives without fear propping them up. Take fear away, and people become unrecognizable, even to themselves. What the world calls sanity is obedience. To be predictable, to be soft, to agree without thinking too hard. Step outside of that, and watch how quickly the smiling faces change. People don't fear cruelty. They fear a mind that doesn't flinch. That's why truth-tellers are exiled, why prophets are murdered, why thinkers are mocked, because they do not participate in the game. They terrify simply by standing still, while everyone else scrambles for meaning. No one understands how much must be torn away to reach that state. First comes disgust, not with the world, but with the self, the need to be liked, to be understood, to be held and congratulated. Every ounce of that rot has to be exposed. Then comes the burning, not literal fire, but the internal kind, where nothing satisfies, where the pleasures once clung to become empty. No joy, no grief, just clarity so sharp it cuts the nerves. Most turn back at that point. That's where the mind begins to rebel. It pleads, it rationalizes, it promises relief if the discomfort is abandoned. That's how weak minds protect themselves. But a stronger one doesn't listen. It doesn't seek safety, it seeks the root. And the root is always pain, not the theatrical kind, not suffering for the sake of attention, but the pain of seeing with eyes that no longer blink. The pain of seeing the system, the crowd, the family, the self, laid bare. No lies left to hide behind. Every memory re-examined without the soothing filters. Every ambition tested for truth. Every emotion interrogated like a hostile witness. The question repeated over and over, is this mine or was it given to me? What isn't earned is discarded. What is weak is burned. What was inherited without thought is destroyed, even if it was sacred, especially if it was sacred. That's where the real construction begins. Once the inner cathedral has been reduced to dust, no borrowed beliefs, no inherited ethics, no social script. From the ruin, one brick is selected, then another, slowly, painfully, deliberately. Each thought forged, not accepted. Each value chosen, not adopted. This mind does not react. It calculates. It doesn't hope, it moves. It doesn't need a reason to continue. It is its own engine. Where others look outward for truth, scriptures, experts, voices of the dead, this mind turns inward. Not because it thinks it knows everything, but because it knows how easily truth becomes a performance when filtered through crowds. It trusts silence more than consensus. Silence never flatters. In this silence, something new is born. Not belief, not purpose, but presence. A sharpness that cannot be mimicked. Words become rare. Movement becomes intentional. Every action is weighed against necessity. Nothing is wasted. Others notice. They feel it before they understand it. The discomfort, the challenge, the quiet pressure of being in the presence of something that cannot be influenced. They don't know why, but they sense it. This mind does not belong to them. It doesn't seek permission. It doesn't negotiate, it simply is. There is no need to prove anything. Strength that has been proven to itself no longer needs witnesses. There is no anxiety about being misunderstood. Misunderstanding is expected. Welcomed, it keeps the weak away. The only ones who remain are those who recognize the silence for what it is. Discipline forged in war. But the war was not with the world. It was with every impulse that once governed from within. To break the inner slave is the real rebellion. Not to shout, not to destroy others, but to conquer that voice that begs for mercy every time discomfort arises. That voice that says, what will they think? Or what if I fail? Or what if I lose everything? That voice is not a guardian. It's a parasite. It mimics concern to maintain control. It must be killed. And it doesn't die easily. It adapts. It wears new masks. It pretends to be love, or empathy, or caution. But it is always fear in disguise. The mind must become sharper than that voice, more ruthless, more aware, every time it whispers. It must be answered with silence and action. No debate, no compromise. This is the terrifying mind, not because it seeks destruction, but because it no longer fears it. Not because it wants control, but because it cannot be controlled. That kind of mind rewrites reality for those around it. It exposes the falsehood in their lives just by existing. People sense their masks cracking in its presence. That is power, not noise, not influence, presence. But this power has a price. It is not loneliness, it is aloneness. Loneliness still hopes, aloneness accepts. There will be no crowds, no applause, no soft beds built by others. Only the terrain carved by one's own thoughts, one's own labor. And yet it is not suffering, it is something else. The joy of autonomy, the peace of having nothing to hide, the clarity of never lying to oneself again. That is the reward. Every weakness that once dominated begins to dissolve. Jealousy, neediness, craving, the hunger for status, all of it fades. Not through repression, but through starvation. They were never needed. They were tricks, reflexes taught by frightened men. Without them, something ancient awakens. Not animal, not spiritual, something beyond both. A mind that remembers how to move without chains. A mind that asks nothing of the world, yet bends it simply by not yielding. Others talk of vision, but vision without strength is daydreaming. Others speak of justice, but justice without will is begging. Others chase freedom, but freedom without discipline is self-destruction. All of it is hollow if the mind remains afraid of itself. So the construction continues. Words become rare, thoughts become sharper, time feels different. The mind begins to sense things before they happen. Not magic, pattern recognition, the ability to see what others refuse to see because it would cost them too much. There is no need for revenge. Weakness punishes itself. There is no need for arguments. Reality is not decided by opinion. There is no need to destroy. Rot crumbles on its own. This is the terrifying mind. Not because it is violent, but because it is unmoved. Nothing owns it, not the past, not the crowd, not the inner voice of doubt. It listens to only one thing, necessity. And necessity speaks in silence. The mind that has crossed through fire does not return. It no longer fits inside what once contained it. Every framework, social, emotional, philosophical, feels like a costume now, and the body revolts at the idea of wearing it again. There is no desire to go back. There is only forward. But forward is not progress in the way others speak of it. It's not upward, not outward, not louder, it's deeper, into the bone, into the instinct, into what existed before words taught people how to behave. Thought becomes a blade so fine that it cuts through thought itself. Even the most sacred idea is placed on the altar. No exceptions, no mercy. Not all survive this. Some attempt to carve themselves out and end up hollow, because they try to replace the old illusions with new ones too quickly. The terrifying mind waits. It does not fill the silence. It lets the silence speak. And what it hears is not poetry. It's not affirming. It's cold, blunt, precise. There is no destiny. No one is coming. There is no great plan. All meaning must be made by force, dragged from the void, shaped by discipline, preserved by will. This is where freedom becomes unbearable for most. They crave a tyrant, even if it's a gentle one, an ideology, a leader, a purpose, anything to avoid the rawness of true freedom. Because once the scaffolding is gone, there is no one to blame for failure, no one to credit for success. The weight rests entirely on the individual. The terrifying mind accepts this weight without complaint and begins to build, not to impress, not to save, not to redeem, but because creation is the only rebellion left when destruction is too easy. And it is easy to tear down, to mock, to burn, to sneer. Children can do that. But to build something real, something that reflects the inner order, that is the labor of a terrifying mind. This labor is not fast. It is not fun. It is meticulous. Everything is questioned. Every move examined. There are no shortcuts. Every stone placed must be earned. If one collapses, it is rebuilt. Not with bitterness, but with more precision, with more clarity. The terrifying mind does not celebrate progress. It audits it, always asking, was this necessary? Or was this comfort? Was this creation? Or performance? Was this movement or escape? It makes no apologies for the coldness of these questions, Because warmth lies, warmth makes excuses, warmth says good enough. But precision reveals what warmth hides, and only what survives precision is worth keeping. Others notice, but they don't understand. They mistake it for arrogance, for cruelty, for detachment. They try to explain it through psychology, trauma, or ego. Because they need reasons that don't implicate themselves. They need to believe that anyone who does not play the game must be broken. Because if not, what does that say about the game? So the terrifying mind becomes an unspoken threat, not through action but through being. It becomes the silent proof that another way is possible. And that possibility terrifies those who have staked everything on obedience. That fear is not unfounded, because the terrifying mind does not need to raise its voice. Its silence destabilizes. Its stillness is confrontational. In rooms full of noise, it becomes the gravitational center, not because it demands attention, but because it does not. People sense the difference, not charisma, not charm, presence. Presence that comes from having suffered internally, torn out weakness, stood in the void, and returned with something unshakable. That presence can't be bought, can't be faked, can't be gifted. It can only be earned by one who has killed every comforting lie within and chosen to live without anesthesia. There is no need for validation. The terrifying mind has already validated itself through ordeal. No one else's opinion matters, not because others are inferior, but because their perspective is still filtered through fear. The terrifying mind knows what it once feared. It knows the taste of conformity, the tremble of needing to be liked, the weight of unsaid words. And it also knows the moment all of that broke. It remembers when it stopped pretending, when it walked away from the crowd, not out of hatred, but out of clarity. There was nothing left to gain by being like them. It is not superiority, it is separation. Clean, deliberate, irreversible. This is why the terrifying mind does not preach. It does not recruit. It does not plead. Because it knows no one can be forced to wake up. The door is open, but few walk through. Most stay curled up in their cages, rearranging the furniture, decorating their chains. The terrifying mind does not mourn this. It simply watches and acts. Its actions are sharp, minimal, unapologetic when it speaks. It does not soften when it moves. It does not ask. It is not aggressive. It is exact. Like a scalpel, not a hammer. And precision, more than anything, is what the world fears. Precision sees through lies, through bureaucracy, through politics, through manipulation. Precision is the death of confusion, and confusion is what keeps power structures intact. So yes, the terrifying mind is dangerous. Dangerous to illusions, dangerous to fragile egos, dangerous to systems built on pretending. But it is also the only kind of mind capable of real creation, because it builds from truth, not hope, from structure, not chaos, from necessity, not approval. And what it builds lasts, because every brick is laid with intention. Every decision is made after war with the self. Every movement is born from stillness. Every word a fragment of a deeper order that others cannot see, but feel. This is not charisma. This is not leadership. This is not being admired. This is the quiet kind of power that doesn't fade when attention shifts. It does not rely on trends, followers, applause. Its roots are too deep. Its fire too old. Its gaze too direct. And that directness is its final weapon. Because in a world of avoidance, directness is violence. To say what is true, to act without excuse, to walk without guilt, to think without filter, to see without blinking. That is what terrifies, because it forces others to confront what they are not, what they could be, what they have abandoned. And in that confrontation, there are only two options: destroy the mirror or destroy the illusion. Most choose the mirror, but some hesitate. Some, caught in the blast radius of this terrifying mind, feel something they haven't felt in years, the ancient call to become more, not for approval, not for comfort, but because something dormant in them remembers what it means to be free. And if that spark is strong enough, they will burn everything to reach it. But that is their war. This mind fights no one else's battle. It stands alone. It builds alone. It watches alone, not as a punishment, but as a privilege. Because in this aloneness, nothing is distorted, nothing is diluted. There is only what is and what must be done. Now there is nothing left to destroy. The illusions are gone. The inner voices that once cried out for safety, recognition, and love have grown silent. The body is no longer ruled by fear. The thoughts no longer spiral in defense of anything. What remains is a structure, one that doesn't beg to be seen, one that doesn't care to be named. It just is. Others speak of growth like it's a series of steps, like a ladder that leads somewhere. They imagine transcendence as a journey upwards, toward light, clarity, enlightenment. But this mind went down, deep, into the marrow, into memory, instinct, shadow. It did not ask the sky for answers. It asked the bones. It did not run from its ugliness. It carved it open. Every impulse once disowned was examined without emotion. Every fantasy was crushed under weight. Every virtue turned over in the dark. The result is not purity. It's sovereignty. Nothing outside governs anymore. There are no rules left. There is only order, and order comes not from law, but from force, internal force, the kind forged in silence and fire, the kind that bends the inner chaos without a sound, the kind that makes a man walk through ruin without trembling. The world is full of clever, trained minds, people who speak well, know the right terms, present the right face, but those minds are filled with noise. They bounce between opinions, trends, and signals. They are fed by algorithms and drained by fear. They obey every flicker of discomfort. They argue about meaning, about good and evil, about politics and purpose, yet not one of those thoughts is truly theirs. They have not suffered enough to be dangerous, but this mind has, and that is what gives it weight. It has nothing to prove, not because it thinks it's above others, but because it no longer remembers what it means to seek permission. Every moment is a test of self, not a test of image. Every action comes from inner necessity, not desire for outcome. If it fails, it does not complain. If it succeeds, it does not celebrate. Both are equal. Both are irrelevant. What matters is whether it moved the right way. The terrifying mind is not driven by emotion. Though it feels deeply, it is not cold, but it does not yield. It has simply placed emotion where it belongs, beneath awareness. Anger, sadness, ecstasy, these are not leaders. They are servants, signals, nothing more. And so this mind moves like a ghost through the world, unbothered by insult, untouched by flattery. People search for meaning. They make symbols out of pain. They turn trauma into identity. They cling to stories. But the terrifying mind cuts stories apart, not to hurt but to see. It refuses to decorate its suffering. It refuses to build an altar to its wounds. Pain is pain. It either weakens or strengthens. There is no third path. This mind chose strength, and strength, when real, becomes invisible. It does not announce itself. It's felt, in stillness, in presence, in the refusal to be disturbed by what disturbs others, in the complete lack of need for control over anyone else. The terrifying mind doesn't control. It dominates not through force, but by becoming immovable. There is a kind of power that comes from not needing power. It doesn't need to win arguments. It doesn't need to be right. It doesn't care if others agree. It has already moved past that. Others sense this, and it unsettles them, because they realize suddenly how fragile their convictions are, how much of their strength is borrowed, how their confidence depends on being agreed with. But this mind, it would speak the same words in a void. It would act the same way with no witnesses, because its source is not outside. This is the final stage, where the need for applause dies, where the hunger for recognition is burned away, where solitude is no longer a wound, but the natural home of clarity. The terrifying mind does not seek influence. It is influence, not because of what it does, but because of what it doesn't do. It doesn't flinch, it doesn't chase, it doesn't bend, it doesn't explain. And in a world where everything is explanation, avoidance, decoration, that absence becomes blinding. It reveals what others have hidden, about themselves, about the world, and many hate it for that. They mock, attack, try to smear, but none of it matters. Their words land like snow on fire. They melt before impact, because the terrifying mind has one weapon they cannot counter: indifference, not apathy. Apathy is weakness disguised as coolness. This is something else. This is earned indifference, the kind that comes from seeing everything, feeling everything, surviving everything, and still choosing silence. And so the terrifying mind walks through storms with dry eyes. It loses everything and builds again. It faces betrayal and does not collapse. It stands alone and does not reach out, not because it wants to suffer, but because it remembers what happens every time it compromised, every time it pretended to be less, every time it smiled when it wanted war, every time it gave pieces of itself away for comfort. It remembers, and it will not forget. This is not bitterness, this is honor. It honors itself now. It holds the line. It refuses to step back into the role it burned. It will not act. It will not decorate. It will not become palatable for anyone. Let them fear. Let them misunderstand. That is not its concern. Its concern is building. Not temples, not statues, not fame, but moments, movements, structures of thought so pure they need no defense. And action, pure action. Every step becomes intentional. Every breath returned to rhythm. No waste, no flinching, no falsehood. The terrifying mind becomes a law unto itself. Not chaotic, not impulsive, but ordered, brutally ordered. It creates rituals, shapes time, carves space out of noise. Everything becomes aligned to the inner truth, and that truth does not shift. It is not updated by trends. It is not watered down by feelings. It is not questioned by the crowd. It was earned through war, and it will not be traded. Now the silence becomes something else. Not emptiness, not loneliness, but peace. The terrifying mind does not smile often, but when it does, it is real. When it loves, it is real. When it speaks, it is real. There is nothing else left. The mask has been burned. The skin has thickened. The soul is no longer asking to be seen. It just exists. Sharp, pure, unmovable. Some will try to follow. They'll copy the words, mimic the tone, wear the armor, but they will collapse. Because what they want is the appearance of strength. What this mind lives is the cost of it. The cost was everything. Everything that was soft. Everything that was false. Everything that made it tolerable. And it was worth it. Because now, finally, the mind is quiet. Not numb, not distracted, quiet. Like a predator before movement. Like a god before creation. Like steel before the strike. This is what they fear. Not violence, not rage, not ambition. But the one who no longer waits. No longer wants. No longer hopes. Just watches. And acts. From necessity. From silence. From power. And that is the end. There is nothing more to say. Only what is done next.